They called them the Children. When humanity first reached the stars, the elder races of the galaxy saw them as small, soft, and loud. Too emotional, too chaotic, too new. The humans came with bright eyes and open hands, smiling in the face of creatures older than their entire species. They carried no armies, only promises. They offered peace, trade, and friendship. The galaxy laughed. It had been thousands of years since anyone spoke of peace with sincerity. Power ruled the void. Empires rose and fell in fire. Treaties were signed only when the weak begged the strong to stop burning their worlds. To the old races, peace was just another word for surrender. But humanity, they were different. They didn't beg, they didn't kneel. They just smiled and said, "We can make things better together." No one believed them. The Galactic Council invited the Terran delegation to the core world of Iliath Prime, not out of respect, but amusement. A dozen species gathered there, crystalline elders from the Karath Enclave, silver-eyed diplomats of the Varn Collective, insectoid senators from the Xylar Dominion. They watched as the human envoy stepped onto the marble floor. A tall woman in a simple black uniform, a small emblem of blue and white on her chest. Admiral Helena Voss, someone whispered half in jest, a military title for a peace mission. The council chamber was vast, lit by suns captured in containment fields shining through transparent domes. The air smelled of ozone and ancient stone. Helena stood alone in the center. Her voice was calm but carried power, the kind that didn't come from pride but from conviction. "We have crossed the stars," she said, "not to conquer but to connect. Humanity offers technology, medicine, and alliance. We believe peace is not a dream, it is a decision." Silence followed, then came laughter. The Xylar speaker, tall and armored in glittering chitin, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking. "Peace, human. Do you think words can erase 1,000 wars? Do you think your small blue world can teach the galaxy anything?" Helena did not flinch. "We don't teach peace," she said. "We fight for it." That silenced them, if only for a moment. In the following months, humanity spread across the galactic stage like wildfire. They signed trade agreements with the minor colonies. They rebuilt forgotten stations. They shared their miracle nanotech and medical advancements freely. On worlds long abandoned, Terran engineers restored air and soil. On shattered moons, Terran builders raised cities again. The old powers grew uneasy. Humanity was not playing the game by their rules. They were not asking for territory or tribute or influence, yet they were gaining all three. The people loved them. Merchants spoke of Terran honesty. Farmers praised Terran food seeds that grew even in wastelands. Refugees found homes in human colonies, no questions asked. The humans had become a legend, saviors wrapped in skin and steel. And that terrified the rulers of the galaxy. Because for the first time in living memory, power was shifting not by force but by kindness. The Xylar Dominion was the first to act. They had ruled the Outer Rim for centuries through fear and blood. To them, peace was poison. To them, humanity's rise was rebellion. So they made an example. Without warning, their fleets descended upon the human colonies of Eos and Lyra 9. Cities burned beneath plasma storms. Spaceports were vaporized mid-broadcast. The screams of 1,000,000 civilians echoed through subspace before the lines went silent. The Dominion called it the lesson of obedience. But humanity heard it as a declaration of war. When the first survivors limped back to Earth, the world went still. The Terran Council gathered in the Hall of Nations. Every leader, every admiral, every colonist representative stood beneath the great map of the stars, the map that now burned red where their people had died. No shouting, no debate, only silence. Finally, Admiral Voss rose. Her voice was low, but her words carried through every channel, every station, every fleet. "We offered peace. They answered with fire, so be it. We will speak in the only language they understand." The orders went out that same night. 3 weeks later, the UNS Retribution left orbit. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built, a black spear of metal and wrath, its engines humming like the heartbeat of a god. It carried no diplomats, no flags, no mercy. The ship disappeared into the deep. For days, the galaxy waited, mocking the children and their futile gesture. Then one morning, the stars above Xylar Prime tore open. Every sensor across 100 systems recorded it, the sudden bloom of light, the shockwave that rippled through space. The Retribution had arrived, alone. The Xylar fleet, 200 strong, moved to intercept. They laughed as they surrounded the human ship, a single vessel against an empire. But the laughter died when the human vessel's hull began to glow. What followed became legend. The Retribution did not fire lasers or missiles. Instead, it unleashed kinetic lances, rods of dense metal propelled at near-light speeds. Each shot cut through a cruiser as if through paper. Explosions blossomed like suns. The Xylar flagship vanished in a cloud of molten debris. The humans said nothing. No speeches, no ultimatums, just action. Within an hour, Xylar Prime's orbital defense grid was gone. Within 2, their capital continent was burning. By the 3rd hour, the human admiral broadcast one message, across every channel, every frequency. You wanted our attention, you have it. And then she left. In the days that followed, the galaxy trembled. Empires called emergency councils. The elder species whispered of the Terran wrath. For the first time in ages, the powerful were afraid not of invasion, but of something worse. A species that had spoken of peace and meant it. A species that had warned them and followed through. The humans didn't conquer. They didn't demand surrender. They just waited silent, cold, and watching. The stars had changed that day. Everyone knew it. And deep within the heart of the Terran Federation, humanity began to build again, this time not for peace, but for war. The galaxy did not sleep after Xylar Prime burned. News spread faster than light. Across every star system, every communication channel, every shadowed corner of the void, one name echoed like a storm: humanity. They had been called dreamers, idealists, children, but now they were something else, something the old races had forgotten how to fear. The Terran Federation sent no fleets to occupy the ruins of Xylar space. They made no demands. They simply vanished back into the dark, leaving the shattered worlds behind as silent witnesses. And that silence was worse than war. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the elders argued. "This is madness," hissed a Karath noble, his crystalline body refracting the light like a shattered prism. "They destroyed a Dominion capital for what? For 2 colonies." A Varn representative, her silver eyes unblinking, replied softly, "They warned us. You all heard them. They offered peace and the Dominion spat on it." "They are dangerous," another barked. "No species that young should wield that kind of power." But beneath all the words, beneath the arrogance and fear, there was something else, something the elder races had not felt in centuries. Shame. Because deep down they knew, humanity had done what none of them ever dared. They had avenged their dead. Far from the debates and the lies, humanity prepared. In the shipyards of Luna and Titan, new dreadnoughts were forged. Entire moons became factories. Spaceports that once traded grain and metals now built weapons that could rewrite the stars. Every man, every woman, every child of the Federation felt the weight of what was coming. Families whispered goodbyes under the glow of neon skis. Soldiers stood in silence before the flags of their worlds. They were not fighting for glory. They were fighting to make sure no one ever hurt them again. Admiral Helena Voss watched the stars from the bridge of the UNS Retribution. The faint blue glow of Earth shimmered in the distance, small and fragile, the world she had sworn to protect. Her crew moved quietly. They all knew what her orders were. The Xylar Dominion had shattered, but its allies, the empires that had cheered its attack, were stirring. They thought humanity would stop after one strike, that they would return to their naive peace talks and empty promises. They were wrong. Helena clenched her fists behind her back as she stared into the dark. "They call us monsters," she whispered. "Let them. If monsters are what it takes to keep our people safe, then monsters we shall be." Her second-in-command, Commander Reyes, nodded. "Ma'am, our fleets are ready. Orders from High Command we hold until provoked." Helena gave a thin smile. "Oh, they'll provoke us." And she was right. 3 weeks later, the first retaliations began. Human convoys vanished in deep space. Merchant stations went silent. The Federation sent scouts and found wreckage, burned hulls, frozen corpses drifting between stars. The attacks came from everywhere: raiders from the Vorn clans, mercenaries hired by the Karath, assassins funded by shadowed empires. They thought if they kept their hands clean, humanity wouldn't know. But humanity always knows. The Terran Intelligence Corps tracked every signal, every hidden transmission, every whisper in the void. When the proof was found, the response was swift and merciless. One by one, the raiders' bases went dark. Entire fleets vanished without trace. Rumors began spreading of ghost ships, human vessels with no transponders, no mercy, no survivors. They called them the Black Fleet. No one knew if it truly existed. No one dared to find out. In the colony of Arcadia, the war finally came home. It was a garden world, green oceans, golden fields, and skies so blue they looked painted, a symbol of the Federation's dream. But on the night of the Harvest Festival, the sky cracked open. Dozens of alien warships descended, their weapons lighting the horizon with fire. The Xylar remnants had returned, desperate for revenge. Arcadia's defenses held for only 6 hours. Civilians flooded underground bunkers. Families screamed as the cities burned. But before despair could take root, the clouds above parted. The UNS Retribution had arrived. Its entry shattered the sky. The sound of its cannons thundered across continents. Beams of white light lanced through the atmosphere, tearing apart enemy ships one by one. The air itself seemed to vibrate with fury. From the burning fields, survivors looked up and saw it, a black shape cutting through the heavens, its hull glowing red-hot, the flag of Earth painted like a wound across its armor. And in that moment, every human on Arcadia knew they were not alone. The battle lasted 12 hours. By dawn, the enemy fleet was gone. The ocean steamed where wreckage fell. The air smelled of ozone and ash. Admiral Voss stood in the command deck, her face lit by the fires below. Commander Reyes approached, voice quiet. "Arcadia is secure. We've confirmed minimal civilian survivors." She closed her eyes, the words sinking into her like knives. "Minimal," she repeated softly. "We were too late." Reyes hesitated. "Orders, Admiral." Helena opened her eyes again, and for a heartbeat, something cold and unrelenting burned behind them. "Transmit to Fleet Command," she said. "Operation Imberfall is authorized." Reyes froze. "Imberfall, that's—" "A warning," she interrupted. "If they will not listen to peace, then they will learn to fear silence." 3 days later, every Xylar signal in the outer sectors vanished. No distress calls, no responses, no debris, just nothing. Some said the humans had unleashed experimental weapons, fields that erased matter, energy, even memory. Others whispered of drones that hunted anything bearing Xylar code, striking from the dark. But no one ever proved it, because no one dared to go there. Those systems became known as the Ash Zones, and their silence stretched for light years. The other empires watched and waited. Fear turned to anger, anger turned to unity. In secret, they formed an alliance, 23 civilizations bound by one purpose: to stop the humans before the galaxy burned. They called it the Grand Accord. They gathered their fleets, their armies, their greatest weapons. The Karath brought their crystal dreadnoughts. The Mindborn unleashed their synthetic legions. The Varn sent swarms of nanite clouds that could devour ships whole. It was the largest coalition ever formed. They believed it was enough. But in the dark, watching through hidden satellites and listening stations, humanity knew. They had always known. And they were ready. Far above Earth, the UNS Retribution hung silent among the stars, surrounded by a growing armada of Terran warships. Hundreds, thousands, each one built from pain, from fear, from the ashes of worlds they had lost. Admiral Voss stood once more on her bridge, her reflection glimmering in the glass as Earth turned slowly below. "Let them come," she whispered. For in her heart, she knew the truth the galaxy would soon learn. Humanity had not sought war, but once drawn into it, they would end it. Completely. The stars were burning. From the outer rim to the galactic core, humanity's name was whispered in every shadow, spoken with fear, hate, and awe. The war that no one wanted had begun, not with a declaration, but with a scream. And at its heart stood Earth. The cradle of humanity, once blue and beautiful, now glowed with the fires of industry. The skies above it were thick with shipyards and battle stations. What had once been a symbol of hope had become a fortress world, the heart of a species preparing for the storm. The message from the Terran Council was simple. If they want war, we will give them one, and we will end it. The Grand Accord's fleets gathered near the Epsilon Rift, a tier of warped space glowing like a wound in the void. 23 civilizations united under one banner, an alliance of desperation and pride. Hundreds of thousands of warships filled the black. Colossal dreadnoughts from the Karath, living hive carriers from the Vorn, sentient war constructs from the mind-born collective. They called it the Crusade of Balance. Their leaders believed it would be swift, that humanity would break under the weight of a galaxy, that the children of Earth would finally learn their place. But humanity had already learned that lesson long ago, in blood and fire. And they had sworn never again. On the flagship UNS Retribution, Admiral Helena Voss stood in silence before the tactical display. Thousands of enemy signatures flickered across the holomap like stars gone mad. Her crew waited for her command, every soul aboard aware that this could be the final battle. The radio crackled softly, with transmissions from other Terran fleets. Home fleet in position. Titan defense grid online. All Wrath-class carriers reporting green. Helena closed her eyes and whispered, "For Earth." The Grand Accord made the first move. A wave of plasma torpedoes streaked across the rift, lighting the void with blue fire. The impact tore through the forward human line, shredding dozens of escort ships. Then came the assault drones, millions of them blotting out the light. For a moment, it seemed the humans would be overwhelmed. But then the Terran response came. The Retribution sent out a single pulse, a coded signal that rippled through every Terran vessel. At once, the Federation's fleets shifted formation, moving with impossible precision like a single living organism. The space between them shimmered. And then the void burned. Human warships unleashed the Inferno protocol. Thousands of rail cannons fired in unison, their rounds glowing white-hot as they accelerated to near-light speed. Each slug tore through dozens of enemy ships, ripping through shields, armor, and flesh alike. The soundless explosions lit the rift like dawn breaking over a battlefield of ghosts. Aboard the Karath flagship Obsidian Crown, High Lord Cirth watched in horror as entire squadrons vanished. "Impossible," he hissed. "How are they tracking us through the rift storms?" A technician's voice trembled. They're not, my lord, they're predicting us every move." Cirth froze. Humans were not supposed to think that fast, but these were not ordinary humans. Each Terran vessel was guided by an AI co-pilot linked to a neural core, a hybrid of machine logic and human instinct. Together, they fought like one mind across 1,000 ships. The galaxy had built its fleets for domination. Humanity had built theirs for survival. And survival had made them gods of war. Hours turned into days. The void became a graveyard of twisted metal and drifting bodies. The Grand Accord's fleets fought with fury and pride, but it was like striking at a hurricane. Human carriers released drone swarms, black wings of death that tore through enemy ranks with surgical precision. Orbital cannons turned entire flotillas into dust. At the height of the chaos, the Retribution broke through the central line. Admiral Voss gave the order that would echo across history. "All ships full burn, cut through them, burn the rift clean." Her fleet obeyed. The humans charged straight into the heart of the combined armada. The enemy's dreadnoughts unleashed everything they had: plasma storms, dark matter lances, gravity torpedoes. The Terran shields flared and cracked, but they didn't stop. Human ships rammed through enemy formations, venting molten metal and fury. A dying Varn captain broadcast one final message before his ship imploded. "They don't fight like soldiers, they fight like a storm that forgot how to stop." By the fourth day, the battle was over. The Epsilon Rift was silent again, filled only with wreckage and light. Of the Grand Accord's mighty armada, less than a tenth survived. Their leaders retreated to the edges of known space, broken and disbelieving. The war that was supposed to humble humanity had shattered the galaxy instead. And humanity, bloodied, burning, but unbowed, stood victorious. Back on Earth, the skies glowed with the returning fleets. Thousands gathered across every city, watching the ships descend through the clouds like fallen angels. Some cheered, some wept, most simply stood in silence, knowing that something inside them had changed. The Federation declared a day of remembrance, not a victory parade, not a celebration, a day of mourning for the dead on all sides. Because humanity had learned a terrible truth: they could win any war. But in doing so, they were losing the very peace they had once offered. Admiral Voss stood alone on the Retribution's observation deck. Below her, the Earth turned slowly, blue, fragile, and beautiful. Commander Reyes joined her, his uniform scorched, his voice quiet. "The Accord is retreating. They've lost everything. We've done it." Voss didn't answer at first. Her eyes were distant. "We didn't win," she said softly. "We survived, and they will remember what we did here. They will remember it forever." Reyes frowned. "They should. They started this." Helena turned to him, her expression hard as steel. "And we finished it. That's what they'll fear. That's what they'll never forgive." She looked back at the stars, at the endless, empty dark. "We gave them peace once," she whispered. "They mistook it for weakness. Now they'll mistake our silence for mercy." She paused, her reflection caught in the window, the face of a woman who had saved her people, and damned them at the same time. "Let them fear us," she said finally. "Fear keeps the galaxy quiet." And with that, she walked away, leaving the stars behind her glowing red, like embers waiting to burn again. The war should have ended at the Epsilon Rift. It should have been the final battle, the one that made the galaxy step back and say, enough. Humanity had proved its point. The Grand Accord's fleets were shattered. The stars themselves seemed quieter after that storm of fire. But fear is never silent. Fear spreads, it festers, and in the cold heart of space it began to whisper. Humanity cannot be stopped. Humanity will come for us next. Across the galaxy, empires trembled. On the crystal world of the Karath, the elders gathered in their temple of mirrors. Their glowing bodies flickered with unease as the light dimmed through the high ceilings. "They destroyed 100,000 ships," one elder hissed, the sound like breaking glass. "And they did not even claim the systems. What kind of creatures burn their enemies, then walk away?" Another's voice cracked with fear. "Monsters, they do not seek power, they seek safety. There is no defense against a species that fights for survival. None." And in that room, a word was spoken that would soon spread across every empire. Extinction insurance. A plan not to fight the humans directly, but to cage them, to surround their worlds, to cut off their supplies, to make them too afraid to move. The galaxy was uniting again, but this time not for balance or justice. This time it was for fear. Meanwhile on Earth, silence had become normal. The streets were clean, the skies clear, the people proud, yet beneath it all there was something hollow. The news showed rebuilding efforts, the reopening of colonies, the rebirth of trade. But no one forgot the billions who had died. No one forgot the images of entire planets turned to ash. Children were raised on stories of fire, stories that said peace must be guarded by strength, and strength must never be questioned. The Federation became something new, not cruel, not tyrannical, just colder. And at its center stood the Terran Navy, a shadow that stretched across the stars. Admiral Helena Voss sat in her office aboard the UNS Retribution, now stationed above Mars. Her desk was covered in reports, minor skirmishes, missing ships, border tensions. The galaxy was restless again. Commander Reyes entered, carrying a data pad. "Ma'am, long-range sensors have picked up unusual traffic near the Varn border, multiple civilizations gathering fleets." Helena didn't look up. "How many?" Reyes hesitated. "Dozens of systems, hundreds of ships, possibly thousands." Finally, she raised her eyes. "And the Council?" "They're calling it a defensive exercise." Helena gave a dry laugh, the kind that held no humor. "Defensive, that's what they said before Eos burned." Reyes frowned. "What do we do?" Helena leaned back in her chair, eyes distant. "Nothing, not yet. Let them gather. Let them believe they're safe together. It'll make what comes next easier." Far beyond the reach of Terran space, in the void between galaxies, the Grand Accord reformed. They called it the Second Compact. The surviving leaders of 23 species met on the frozen moon of Athera beneath a sky of shattered stars. There they spoke of fear, of vengeance, of extinction. The Karath brought their new crystalline dreadnoughts, ships that could split into hundreds of shards, each with its own weapons. The Varn Collective had developed swarm AIs that could rewrite enemy code mid-battle. The Mindborn had built thought snares, psychic weapons designed to drive organic minds insane. And at the head of this desperate alliance stood Chancellor Rithos of the Mindborn. A being of silver light, its voice echoed through the Grand Chamber. The humans believe themselves merciful, it said. They destroy and call it justice. They build weapons and call it peace. But peace born of fear is no peace at all. We must end them before they end us all. The gathered leaders nodded. None dared disagree. Plans were made. Armadas were built. For the first time in history, the galaxy spoke with one voice, not out of unity but out of terror. On Earth, the stars began to disappear. Ships returning from the outer colonies vanished without a trace. Communication relays went dark. Cargo routes collapsed. It took weeks for humanity to understand what was happening. The second compact had surrounded them. Massive stealth fields cut them off from the rest of the galaxy. Trade halted. Movement halted. The Federation was trapped inside its own borders. It was a cage, invisible, silent, perfect. At first, the people panicked. Then they turned to their leaders, and their leaders turned to Helena Voss. In the war room beneath Luna Base, the air was thick with tension. Hollow screens flickered with red alerts and system failures. Reyes stood at the center, shouting orders. "We've lost contact with Sigma Outpost. No response from the Titan Gate either." Voss entered quietly, her uniform dark, her expression unreadable. "Status." Reyes turned, frustration flashing in his eyes. "They've cut us off, Admiral. Every route, every relay. We can't get out. It's like they vanished behind walls of light." Helena studied the map. The human territories glowed faintly in the center, surrounded on all sides by a sea of unknown signals. "They think they've trapped us," she said softly. "They've forgotten what happens when you corner a human." Reyes blinked. "You're not suggesting." "I am." She looked up, eyes cold as iron. "We don't run, we break the cage." That night the Terran Council convened in emergency session. The debate was short. There was no longer any talk of peace, no more hesitation. Helena's plan was simple and terrifying: strike first. If the galaxy wanted to isolate humanity, then humanity would shatter the galaxy's unity. They would hit every stronghold, every relay, every fleet all at once. Burn the sky until the cage cracked. Operation Tempest Veil was born. It was not just a counterattack, it was a promise. And when it began, it was like the universe itself screamed. Thousands of Terran warships jumped into enemy space at once, emerging inside guarded sectors that no one believed could be breached. The Wrath-class carriers unleashed drone storms. Terran AI fleets tore through enemy code and turned their own defenses against them. The black-armored shock troops, the Earthborn Guard, landed on enemy worlds and left nothing standing. Entire systems went dark. The compact's unity began to crack under the sheer weight of it. The Varn called for retreat. The Mindborn demanded negotiations, but the humans didn't respond. They didn't speak anymore. They only burned. By the end of the second week, 10 civilizations had fallen. Their fleets scattered, their leaders dead or hiding. The rest fled to the edges of the galaxy, praying the humans would stop. But humanity did not chase them. They simply withdrew, silent once more, leaving behind a galaxy in ruin, a galaxy that now understood the truth. Humanity did not seek conquest. They sought peace. And peace, when denied, had become something else. A warning. Admiral Helena Voss stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the wreckage drift past. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They called us children. Maybe they were right." Reyes looked at her. "Children grow up." She nodded slowly, and they learned to protect what's theirs. Far beyond human space, the surviving empires gathered in the dark. They no longer spoke of unity. They no longer planned wars. They spoke of hiding, because the galaxy had learned the final truth. Humanity's peace was not the calm after war. It was the calm before it. And somewhere out there in the stars, the humans were watching, waiting, with fire in their hearts and silence in their wake. The sky above Earth was not blue anymore. It was silver, filled with ships, thousands of them. Human warships, defense platforms, orbital cannons. The homeworld of mankind had become a fortress of light and steel. Every satellite gleamed like a blade. Every shadow carried the hum of engines. But even fortresses can tremble. Because beyond the edge of Sol system, an ocean of fire was coming. The Grand Compact had gathered its final strength. 20 civilizations that had survived humanity's fury had united one last time. Their fleets filled the void like a storm that blotted out the stars. The largest armada in recorded history was heading straight for Earth. Admiral Helena Voss stood on the bridge of the UNS Retribution, watching the distant flickers of light approach. Her face was calm, but her hands were clenched behind her back. She had seen many battles. She had seen worlds burn and empires crumble, but this was different. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was survival. Commander Reyes approached, his uniform dark with oil and dust from endless preparation. Admiral, Fleet Command confirms all home sectors are on alert. The moons are fortified. Mars Defense reports orbital grids ready. Voss nodded, and the civilians. Evacuation complete. Everyone's underground. She took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the growing lights. Good, they'll need to stay there. The Grand Compact Armada emerged from hyperspace in a wave of golden fire. Millions of ships, dreadnoughts, carriers, swarm fleets, hive beasts, even living planet ships, all moving as one. At their center was the crown of Athera, the flagship of Chancellor Rithos of the Mindborn. The creature's voice echoed across all channels, clear and cold. This is the end of humanity's illusion. The stars belong to the old blood, not the children of Earth. On the bridge of the Retribution, Voss stared at the message without blinking. Then let the old blood bleed. The first shots came from beyond Neptune's orbit. The enemy fired a wall of plasma so bright it turned the darkness into dawn. Terran shields rippled under the impact, glowing orange, then red. Dozens of defense satellites overloaded and exploded. The Battle of Sol had begun. Human fleets launched forward from Jupiter's orbit, thousands of ships flying in tight formation. Drones poured from carriers like flocks of metal birds, darting between the enemy lines. Railguns screamed through the void. The space between Mars and Saturn became a graveyard of light. In the middle of the chaos, the Retribution cut through the enemy lines like a blade through glass. Admiral Voss stood tall, her voice steady as she called orders. Group Sigma flank left, Theta Squadron hold the line, all Wrath class fire the Inferno grid. Dozens of massive warships turned as one, their cannons aligned. The void lit up with white fire, a lattice of plasma beams that sliced through entire formations. The enemy's vanguard vanished in a storm of molten metal. But for every enemy destroyed, 10 more appeared. The galaxy had come prepared. Admiral, Reyes shouted over the alarms. They're targeting the Sol Gate. Voss's heart clenched. The Sol Gate, Earth's only hyperspace barrier, was the key to keeping the system safe. If it fell, the enemy would pour through and surround the planet. Redirect the home fleet, she commanded. We hold that gate. The Retribution turned sharply, engines roaring, and joined the defense. All across the system, humans fought like demons. From the rings of Saturn, sniper cannons fired rounds so massive they could split moons. From Mars, orbital lasers burned holes through swarms the size of cities. Even the asteroid belts came alive. Mining drones turned into suicide weapons, ramming enemy ships with nuclear payloads. Humanity had turned every rock, every planet, every orbit into a weapon. Still, the tide began to turn. The Compact's armada pushed forward relentlessly. Their numbers were endless. The sky grew darker, filled with debris and flame. Entire Terran squadrons were wiped out in minutes. When the UNS Hera fell, one of Earth's oldest carriers, the explosion lit the void like a dying sun. The shockwave cracked through the radio silence, carrying one last message. Tell Earth we did not break, we burned. Voss closed her eyes for a second. She felt the weight of every voice lost to the void. Then she whispered to herself, no one dies for nothing. Hours passed, the battle raged without pause. Inside Earth's command bunker, leaders watched the live feeds in horror. The sky was filled with smoke and falling debris. The ground shook with distant impacts as enemy bombardments struck the upper atmosphere. The people could hear the thunder of war, the heartbeat of a dying galaxy. But they also heard something else, the sound of hope. Because above the clouds, humanity still fought. At the peak of the battle, when all seemed lost, Admiral Voss gave the final order. Activate the Inferno protocol. Reyes froze. Ma'am, that will ignite the entire orbital field, will burn everything, enemy and friendly alike. Her eyes were cold but not cruel. If Earth burns, it will burn on our terms. Reyes hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. The command went out. Across the system, every Terran ship armed with plasma cores began to glow. Energy surged through the network. Space itself seemed to tremble. And then the stars turned red. The Inferno protocol was more than a weapon. It was vengeance given form. A storm of white plasma swept across the void, spreading from Earth's orbit outward like a tidal wave of fire. Enemy ships melted before they could flee. Entire fleets dissolved into light. Even the vacuum screamed, silent shockwaves rippling through space, as energy devoured everything in its path. The human fleets burned too. Many never escaped the blast, but none turned away. They stood their ground, holding the line until the end. When it was over, there was no movement, no sound, no enemy left to fight. Only silence. Hours later, when the fires dimmed, the view from Earth showed a sky filled with glowing ash, the remains of ships, both alien and human, drifting together in the endless dark. The Grand Compact was gone. The galaxy's greatest armies had been erased in a single night. Admiral Voss stood on the shattered bridge of the Retribution. Half her crew was gone. The hull was broken, the engines dead, but she was alive. Commander Reyes limped to her side, coughing through smoke. It's over, he said softly. They're all gone. Voss stared at the burning horizon, her face lit by the glow of distant wreckage. No, she said. It's not over, it never will be, not after this. He frowned. You saved Earth. She shook her head slowly. We saved it, yes, but we also ended something. Reyes looked out the window at the wreckage of alien ships and human steel floating side by side. What did we end? The illusion, she whispered. The lie that peace could be built without fear. She turned away, her eyes cold and wet. Now the galaxy knows what peace costs. In the years that followed, the story of the Battle of Sol spread across the stars. Some called it humanity's greatest victory. Others called it the death of hope. But every race that survived knew one thing. Humanity could never again be underestimated. For they had faced the galaxy and burned it to save themselves. And as the ashes drifted through the void, one truth became eternal. When humanity fights for peace, the stars themselves tremble. The war was over. The galaxy was quiet, too quiet. For the first time in centuries, no fleets moved. No shots were fired. No empires plotted against one another. The void was still, haunted by the ghosts of fire. They called it the Great Silence. It began after the Battle of Sol. The ashes of 1,000 armadas drifted through space, silent reminders of what had been lost. The stars seemed dimmer now, as if the universe itself was afraid to shine too brightly. Humanity had survived, but something inside them had changed forever. Earth was still standing, though its skis were scarred and its people weary. The cities had lights again. Children played again. Factories rebuilt the world piece by piece. Yet the air carried a strange weight, not grief, not anger, but awareness. The people of Earth had seen the edge of extinction, and they had looked back from it. The Federation declared an age of recovery. The fleets that had once burned worlds now carried supplies to shattered colonies. Soldiers became engineers. Drones once built for death now repaired cities and healed soil. But behind every act of kindness was fear, the memory of what they were capable of when provoked. And across the galaxy, that same fear took root. In the ruins of alien empires, silence ruled. The surviving Karath sealed themselves in crystal bunkers beneath their dying suns, terrified to draw humanity's gaze. The Varn collective turned inward, cutting off all communication, their machines whispering of surrender and sorrow. The Mindborn, who once spoke across 1,000,000 systems, fell silent entirely. Entire civilizations wiped their records clean, deleting mentions of Earth, of humans, of anything Terran. It was as if pretending humanity didn't exist could protect them from ever meeting them again. The younger species learned from their elders. They grew up hearing warnings whispered in the dark. Never speak the name of the ones from Sol. Never challenge the children of fire. Humanity had become a myth, a ghost, a nightmare that haunted the stars. Admiral Helena Voss sat in her quarters aboard the UNS Retribution, now docked above Luna. The once mighty warship was scarred, its hull patched, its engines dormant. She stared out the window, watching the blue glow of Earth rise over the gray horizon. For the first time in years, there were no orders to give, no battles to plan. Just silence. Commander Reyes entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee, real, not synthesized. "You should sleep," he said. Voss didn't look away from the window. "Can't, it's too quiet." Reyes sat across from her. "You'd think quiet is what we fought for." She gave a bitter smile. "Maybe we did, but peace feels different when it's built on ashes." He hesitated. "The Council wants you to take command of the new fleet. They're nomming it after you." Her eyes narrowed. "After me for what? For burning half the galaxy?" Reyes looked down. "For saving what was left of it." For a long time, she said nothing. Then, softly, "Maybe saving and destroying aren't as different as we want to believe." Far beyond Sol, deep in the silent void, humanity's ships patrolled the edges of known space. The Federation no longer expanded. They didn't conquer, they just watched. Every outpost was a fortress. Every relay was guarded. The message was clear: humanity didn't trust the galaxy, and the galaxy didn't trust humanity. When alien scouts strayed too close, they were warned once and then never seen again. The Terran Navy called it preventive security. The rest of the galaxy called it fear made flesh. In the years that followed, the galaxy tried to rebuild. New governments rose from the ruins of old empires. Treaties were written, always with the same unspoken rule: do not provoke the Terrans. Trade began again, slowly. Terran engineers helped restore devastated systems, sending aid ships under escort. But no one looked the humans in the eye when they arrived. No one dared. They spoke softly, moved carefully. The fear of humanity had become law. And humanity remembered that too. One evening, Helena Voss stood on the surface of Mars, staring at the stars. The red sands stretched endlessly before her, glowing faintly in the fading light. Behind her, the rebuilt capital city of New Alexandria shimmered with glass towers and quiet streets. Reyes stood beside her, his voice calm. "They say the galaxy is at peace again." She chuckled. "Peace? No, it's just holding its breath." He glanced at her. "You don't think they'll come again?" "They won't," she said. "Not out of courage, but fear fades with time, and fear can be forgotten." He nodded slowly, "And when that happens—" Voss turned her eyes to the stars. "Then we'll remind them." Centuries later, the records of the old wars became stories. The newer species, born after the fires had cooled, thought the tailies were myths. They laughed at the idea of humans, a race that burned fleets with their bare hands and destroyed empires in days. The elders didn't laugh. They whispered warnings to their children. They showed them ancient ruins, planets turned to glass, the broken bones of ships still floating in the dark. And in every story, one phrase endured: "Do not wake the fire that sleeps." But humanity never slept. Their fleets grew larger, stronger, but they no longer showed them to the stars. Their technology advanced quietly, in silence. They no longer needed to prove anything. The Terran Federation became something vast and unseen, a shadow behind the galaxy's curtain. When others fought, they watched. When others begged for help, they decided. Peace lasted because humanity allowed it to. And every ruler in every system knew one truth: if the humans ever chose to fight again, there would be no second dawn. Back on Earth, beneath the quiet hum of a repaired world, children played under blue skis. They didn't remember the war. They didn't know the smell of smoke or the sound of orbital fire. To them, humanity was just home. But in museums and archives, under glass cases, the relics of the old wars remained: scorched helmets, burned flags, the metal fragments of alien ships. Above them all hung a single quote, carved in steel: "Peace is not given, peace is defended." And beneath those words was a name: Admiral Helena Voss. Late one night, deep beneath the Terran capital, in a chamber only a few knew existed, a holographic map flickered to life. It showed the galaxy, still fractured, still recovering. But at its center, the Sol system glowed bright red. A message blinked beside it, repeating endlessly: "Status vigilant." In the silence between stars, a truth lingered, unspoken but known to all. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy, they had tamed it. The fires they once unleashed still echoed in the void, reminding every world what happened when peace was broken. And though the stars shone once more, Every civilization, every empire, every being who looked to the night sky carried the same thought, whispered like a prayer. Please don't let them wake again. Because everyone knew the same truth. When humanity's peace ends, the galaxy burns. The stars remember. Even when the worlds forget, even when history fades into myth, the light of 1,000 burned systems still drifts through the void, silent and endless. Every flicker, every ember, every faint glow of starlight carries a memory of what once was. The day humanity rose and the galaxy trembled. Centuries had passed since the Great Silence began. The galaxy had grown calm, almost peaceful, empires rebuilt. New species rose, trade and diplomacy returned, cautious and careful. But the memory of fire was never truly gone. It lingered in the shadows, in the half-spoken stories told by elders, in the ruins left untouched, in the whispers carried by the void itself. Humanity had not fallen, humanity had simply stopped moving. And that terrified everyone. On the world of Terra, a council of the new Galactic Compact gathered in secret. They met in an underground hall built beneath a mountain of glass, the remains of a world once scorched during the old wars. They spoke softly, almost afraid to be heard. "The Terrans have been silent for too long," said a scaled delegate, his golden eyes darting around. "Their fleets haven't moved in 200 years. Their borders are closed. No one knows what they're building." A crystalline being shivered, its body cracking faintly. "That's what frightens me most. A human who speaks is dangerous. A human who says nothing is worse." Another voice, calm, mechanical, came from the mind-born envoy. "Perhaps they are gone, extinct. Their technology could have turned on them." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room, thin and uneasy. But then an older being spoke. Its voice was gravel and wind. "Extinct," it whispered. "No, the Terrans do not die, they wait." And the chamber fell silent again. Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of mapped space, a light flickered. It came from a world no one dared to visit, a black, airless rock orbiting a dying sun. There were no cities there, no colonies, no life. But beneath its frozen surface, deep in the dark, something slept. Rows of ships, silent, sleek, and ancient, rested in colossal vaults carved into the stone. Their hulls gleamed faintly, reflecting the faint glow of status lights that had not dimmed in centuries. Above them, on a command dais covered in dust, a single hologram flickered to life. It was a human woman, pale light forming her face, her eyes calm and knowing. "Admiral Helena Voss, Terran Defense Command. Operation Vigilant remains active. Peace status stable. Retaliation sequence dormant." Her voice paused, then the tone changed almost imperceptibly. "But vigilance endures." The hologram faded, the silence returned, the hum of ancient machines continued. The fire was sleeping, but not extinguished. On Earth, the homeworld was a paradise again. Forests covered continents that had once been ash. Cities rose like silver towers under clear skies. Oceans glittered. Humanity had rebuilt itself, stronger, calmer, wiser. Children learned about the wars in school, though their teachers spoke softly when they reached the part about the Inferno. They showed images of burnt worlds and fleets turned to dust. And every year on Remembrance Day, the people gathered under the open sky. They looked up at the stars in silence, not in pride, not in guilt, but in understanding. Their peace had been earned in fire. Their freedom had been bought with fear. And they knew what it took to keep it. In orbit above Mars, a station called Horizon Gate watched the stars. It was the oldest human outpost, still operational, still scanning, still waiting. The officers stationed there had grown complacent. Generations of peace had made them confident that the galaxy would stay quiet forever. Until one night, the silence broke. A faint signal arrived, weak, broken, but unmistakably alien. It came from beyond the outer rim, near the remains of the old Xyler systems. It was a distress call. The transmission was chaotic, voices overlapping, systems failing, explosions in the background. One phrase kept repeating. "They're coming, not humans, worse." Then static. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. One of them, a young commander, hesitated before sending the report to Earth Command. She whispered to herself, "Not humans." But deep down, everyone knew what came next. Because if there was something worse, if something dared threaten the balance humanity had built, Then humanity would awaken, and the galaxy would burn again. When the message reached Earth, the Council met for the first time in a century. They sat around a circular table of black stone, their faces grim. "They're testing us," said one general. "Whoever sent that signal, they want to see if we'll respond." Another spoke quietly. "If we ignore it, they'll think we've grown weak." Admiral Lira Chen, commander of the modern Terran Navy, looked around the room. "If we respond, they'll remember what we are." No one spoke for a long time. The weight of history hung over them like a storm. Finally, Chen whispered, "Send one ship, just one." The ship they sent was not a warship, not at first glance. It was a sleek vessel with no markings, its surface black as the void. Inside, a small crew watched the stars drift by as they approached the coordinates of the distress call. When they arrived, they found nothing but ruins. The system was shattered, planets broken, moons drifting in pieces, the remnants of an entire fleet floating in silence. And in the middle of it all, they found a beacon, human-made, centuries old, blinking weakly. The captain frowned. "Impossible, this beacon predates the silence." Before anyone could respond, the beacon came to life. A hologram flickered into being, static and faint. It was Helena Voss. Her voice was calm, ageless, haunting. "If you are hearing this, then the galaxy has forgotten. The fire must never be allowed to fade. Peace must be guarded even from peace itself." The hologram paused, eyes piercing through centuries of time. "Remember what we are. Remember what we can become." Then the beacon went dark. When the crew returned to Earth, the message spread faster than light. For the first time in generations, the Terran Navy mobilized. Fleets stirred. Factories woke. The sleeping titans in the outer systems came alive again, their engines igniting one by one. Across the galaxy, old fears awoke with them. Empires froze, councils panicked. Worlds went dark, pretending to be empty. Because every being, every leader, every empire understood what that message meant. Humanity was awake again. And when humanity awakens, the galaxy burns. On the night the first fleet departed Sol, the people of Earth stood under the stars and watched the ships rise into the heavens. There were no cheers, no celebrations, only silence, heavy and knowing. In that silence, Admiral Chen spoke the words that would echo through the centuries to come. "Peace is not our gift to the galaxy, it is our warning." The fleets vanished into the black, the stars swallowed them whole. And somewhere deep in the endless dark, the inferno stirred once more. Because humanity had not changed. They had only learned patience. And patience in the hands of fire is the most dangerous weapon of all.